How about a break from the coaching carousel? I think that sounds good. What about you, Bill?
That sounds lovely. Let's do it.
All right, let's talk ball. Let's have a little tackling Tuesday on the podcast daily. He's Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward. We're going to start getting into our, spring previews. It feels early for that, but it might not be. We didn't actually do reviews for the 2024 season because the season just ended 2 weeks ago. So let's mash them all together, and maybe that'll take us up to. We did get a little tidbit from Ryan Day over the weekend that he told Joel Klatt spring ball would start after spring break. So we've got some time to fill, a little bit more than we thought.
Yeah, I've always thought, by the way, that and I don't know if you agree or not, the start spring practice, then take off a week, then come back to spring practice thing was a little odd. So it seems like Ohio State is now going to avoid that and just wait for spring break to be over before they start.
Yeah, I did hate that. And so I'm glad that that's going away. Tackling Tuesday. If we're looking at this and we're trying to sidestep some of the coaching carousel chatter, well, James Laurinaitis, who was part of the spinning rotation a year ago, that worked out quite well. The linebackers, they played quite well. So let's start with that group. We pretty much know what that's going to look like. They played very well in 2024, and I think that there's reason to be excited about 2025.
Yeah, I think, we talked in the offseason of, I guess first we talked about you got to promote James Laurinaitis, and then they did that. But then James Laurinaitis inherited a position group that I think probably fairly at the time had a decent amount of questions about it. And when you look, especially if you just sort of went position by position or level by level through the defense, the one that probably worried you the most were the linebackers, which totally made sense at the time. But I thought they did a tremendous job of answering all those questions. It maybe started out a tad bit slow as Ohio State tried to figure out how exactly CJ Hicks fits into the picture. Sonny Styles had to grow a little bit as a player. Cody Simon was pretty good from the jump, although he was did he not play
Injured.
the opener? Is that right? Yeah. He was injured to start the year. God, that feels like such a long time ago. It's just I don't know that we intend on doing this for every position coach, but I don't know how you could give James Laurinaitis anything other than an A for the way that position group played this year. Then you throw the recruiting on top of it, which we can talk about as we be more forward thinking here. But I thought the linebackers were tremendous. Cody was great. Sonny really settled in. Maybe if there's one regret, it's they didn't maybe establish a ton of depth. Arvell Reese played 300 snaps, and I thought played well when he was out there too. It was a bit of a streamlined role, but he was good in it. So if you would have told anybody, I think hey, this is what the season for the Ohio State linebackers is going to look like this time last year, I think 100 out of 100 people would have signed up for it, because I really don't know how it could have been much better than it was.
Yeah, I don't think that we should have revisionist history about what the expectations were for Ohio State at linebacker, because you had, even if you thought the world, and I think almost everyone who's ever watched him play or encountered James Laurinaitis, he's going to be a really good coach. But going into last year, that was the first time he was doing that on a full-time basis. The book on Cody Simon is he's a heart and soul. He's an emotional leader, but it wasn't he's a game-changing, dominant linebacker, which is what he became. People still had high hopes and sky-high expectations for Sonny Styles, but that was a move down from safety. CJ Hicks, we didn't know what that was going to look like or if he was going to stick there. We talked about him being a Jack or Leo and moving around. And then Arvell Reese wasn't really in that conversation much at all. So it was what they became was the best version that any of us could have penciled in or projected for them, which is a tribute to everyone involved. And that includes Jim Knowles and the schematic stuff that they did with them too. So you can't leave that part out. But Cody Simon, just the way he attacked it, I don't know that we'll ever be able to sing his praises enough. I've certainly tried, and I think that the awards voting is criminal because he got the shortest end of the stick of anybody I can remember from the last few years, dating all the way back to maybe Zeke could have won the Heisman if the voting had been different. I think Cody Simon may well have won the Buckeyes if you included the postseason, but there's nothing that can be done to change that. But he was critical for that. And I thought it was interesting. You mentioned Arvell playing 300 snaps. That's sort of straddling both worlds of both looking back for 2024 and ahead to what that means for 2025. Cody Simon played 370 snaps 2 years ago. Like, that's not Arvell played a lot of football. That was spread over 16 games instead of 13 for Cody the year before. Cody was much more into that rotation with Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers than maybe Arvell was, but he wasn't like totally removed from it either. So that's a big deal, because I think that there had been times when we watched the way Ohio State used its linebackers, primarily, I guess now 3 years ago, where it's Tommy and Steele, and that's pretty much it. And are you building depth and preparing for the future? I think James Laurinaitis did a pretty nice job of balancing that with Arvell Reese specifically. But CJ Hicks also played, around 150 snaps. Peyton Pierce got in 30, which is not a huge amount, obviously. But I think that
it's more than freshmen have played in the past, though. Like,
yeah, right. So I think it was a pretty good balance, and I think they managed that room well, both to get through 24 with Cody and Sonny playing their best games in their best level of football in the playoff, while setting the foundation for what's to come, both for Sonny with another year of experience and Arvell, who got more under his belt than we probably would have guessed he would.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And the thing that maybe impressed me the most about Arvell Reese is that Ohio State, I think toward the end of the year, and I asked Jim Knowles about this at a certain point, just sort of stopped playing the 4-3 so much against teams with two tight ends. But then they did bring it back against Texas and Notre Dame, and Arvell had to play more in those two games, like kind of cold after not really playing much at all in the first two playoff games. But he still played well. It's not like he was out there and his head was spinning. It would be understandable if it was, because linebacker is a really tough position. And he was not that as a true freshman. He was on the line of scrimmage, more of a pass rusher as a freshman, and then they moved him off the ball to Mike linebacker as a sophomore, and he really took to it quite quickly and pretty impressively. There'll be more on his plate now, right? Although it's going to help him tremendously to have Sonny Styles there, and I'd imagine Sonny is going to handle most of the communication duties, even if he's not exactly the Mike linebacker and Arvell is. But I have no questions about the group moving forward that I would say are like concerning. Interesting, I think. What is Sonny always going to be an off-ball linebacker? What's CJ Hicks going to do? We think probably play on the edge next year and not necessarily be part of that room. But I think you come to sort of trust James Laurinaitis' evaluations a whole lot more now too, that he has a season of work under his belt as the full-time position coach. So that makes me really excited about a guy like Peyton Pierce, who we said got on the field some. And then you throw in, Garrett Stover, who played a decent amount on special teams. And then the freshmen they brought in are like, it's one of the better, maybe the best linebacker class, at least on paper, coming in that I've seen in my time covering Ohio State. So there's just a lot there to work with. And I think a position coach who curried a lot of favor, deservedly so this year.
You mentioned, the possibility there for Sonny. I think that's one of the more intriguing parts of spring. I don't know that there's a ton of intrigue around this position. Maybe we picked the wrong one to start with because of the stability. Although that was part of the appeal for us. I wonder, because Sonny has, and part of the, if you think back to September when Cody Simon was out and they were moving, Sonny had the lightning bolt on the helmet at some points, and he was getting communication, and he was lined up here and there and everywhere. And that, I think, contributed to some of his quote unquote sluggish start, at least statistically. I wonder if there's a world where he could play more in the middle, and then you let Arvell just roam around and do whatever he wants with that freakish athleticism. I don't know the answer to that. I think that they both have more athleticism than any human should be blessed with. You could do whatever you want with them. And I wonder how they'll decide on who does what better, because to me, whether this was James Laurinaitis or going back even further, whether this was Luke Fickell or anyone who's coached linebackers, then they would say, well, we want our guys to cross train. We want them to be able to be interchangeable. And a lot of times you just look at them physically and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. How could you do that? These are not the same humans. Even as recently as Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg's, that's, you can't ask them to do the same thing. Why would you? I think if you're looking at Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles, you're like, okay,
yeah,
if you want to do that, cool. I believe it, that those guys are freakish enough to do anything you want. And then how do you decide from there? What's the best way? Maybe you don't have to.
I think you definitely could. Yeah, they do in some respects look like someone just like copy and pasted and got a second linebacker out of it, which is like if you're going to copy and paste football players, 6'5", 240 is not a bad template to use when they can run the way that these guys can run.
It's crazy.
That does sort of feel like the natural progression, I guess, of this position, because even I know Cody played some in 2021 before Jim Knowles got here, but when Jim Knowles did get here, it did feel like Cody's role was kind of streamlined until we got to this year, and it started last year, but then this year it's like he can play Mike or Will. And now I'd imagine Sonny will be in a similar conversation now that he has a full season of linebacker play, mostly Will, but some Mike under his belt too. So that maybe Arvell Reese is not going to be as specifically hemmed into Mike linebacker as I was envisioning, because I do think both those guys you have to move them around some. I actually do think, and it's fine. I'm not trying to make like controversy out of nothing. There's plenty of guys who play one position in college and a different position in the NFL. I would imagine both Sonny and Arvell end up playing more on the line of scrimmage in the NFL than they do as off-ball linebackers, just because of how freakishly athletic and kind of long they are. So there could be an opportunity to tap into some of that in college, which I know opens a conversation we've had every single offseason and never really tends to come to
really?
fruition. So
what could that be?
I'm not trying to do that necessarily, but I think if you get like a real push from a guy like Peyton Pierce, or maybe if I guess I would mention Riley Pettijohn first among the incoming linebackers. Like if he's ready to play as a freshman, maybe like I'm talking like Raekwon McMillan style, then maybe you can move Arvell and Sonny around even more. But there's no doubt positional flexibility with the two of them and a ton of versatility if you want to tap into it. And I think we're also having this conversation assuming there will be some scheme continuity going into next year. At least, I know it's treacherous to have any definitive conversations about anything coaching related this time of year, but we'll just say assume for now. That would help that if they wanted to. So it's probably good on you to mention that maybe we shouldn't be thinking of it as like, oh well, Sonny is the Will and Arvell's the Mike, because they can do a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think that because you could take that for granted, and then we'd just immediately shift to who becomes the third or fourth linebacker in here? What does that look like? How much are they going to play? And like that's key. How they develop through the spring camp is going to be critical. I think that conversation is primarily focused on Peyton Pierce, if we had to put a fine point on it, because Gabe Powers left in the transfer portal. If we're running down, the way some of these things have changed for Ohio State since the end of last year. But I think there was maybe a good chance that Peyton Pierce was going to elevate into that conversation anyway. Hold on to your hats, but I was told that there may have been some tampering going on with folks who wanted to get Peyton Pierce into the transfer portal, like for upwards of $450,000. I know that is illegal and against NCAA rules, but I'm told that may have happened. And like you go up to, sort of the deadline, and Ohio State holds on to Sonny Styles, puts off the NFL draft. I don't think there was any real uncertainty with Arvell Reese, going up at that point, but I'm sure there were conversations, because everybody who is ascending into a starting role is going to need to have some representatives represent their interest. Mm-hmm. But Peyton Pierce is someone who I know, and Burma's talked about this dating back to his recruitment, how much James Laurinaitis was on board with the long-term potential for this guy and what a believer he was in that talent. And I think that, Ohio State still very strongly believes in that, but we're only evaluating 30-ish snaps and projecting that forward at this point. This spring is going to be, I think, much more critical for someone in his role, because there is going to have to be a third and fourth linebacker going out there if Ohio State's going to play as many games as it wants to and as it did a year ago.
He also, too, just while we're talking about him, Peyton Pierce played 118 snaps of special teams and played like north of 40 special team snaps in the playoff. Like he actually had an expanded special teams role. I'm assuming he just took over for Gabe Powers.
Yeah.
In the postseason. So, but that's I always want to mention that, because in my mind, like that's not nothing for a true freshman, for especially that time of year where the teams that Ohio State was playing in the stakes in those games. I think it reinforces what they believe about him. And they're going to need it, right? Like you can't go into 2025 for as good as I think Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese are going to be, like only having two. You need to have a little bit of depth there, and their depth, I guess, is still rather inexperienced. But I would have said the same thing coming into last season, and those fears were unwarranted, I guess. So I like Peyton Pierce a lot. I think he's got I don't know, he's got like a little bit of like that Tommy Eichenberg sort of like no nonsense thing about him, but maybe
I think he's got a little more personality to him than Tommy.
Yeah. I meant like no nonsense in approach, but a little more like juice to him personality wise. I think, which is like no offense to Tommy, it worked quite well for him. So I don't know how many different ways I can say this is going to be a really good group, because I think it's going to be. I'm mostly just curious about what exactly it's going to look like. In terms of roles and perhaps tapping into some of that versatility. But I don't, with the way that Ryan Day is describing what spring ball is going to look like, I think any questions down that road are going to be left unanswered until August, most likely.
Yeah. I mean, if you use the old Ohio State barometer of the 2000 snap club that you don't need spring practice for, like, I mean, Sonny doesn't need to do anything, which is also kind of crazy, because part of the appeal for him coming back was to boost his draft stock and become a better all-around linebacker, which he was definitely doing that by the second half of last season. But I don't think, including Sonny himself and then extending to James Laurinaitis, I don't think that they feel like they're done with the development of him, which is a wild thought to have.
No, I don't think so either. He's what, 19? Is that right? So he's or maybe
I don't know.
I think maybe he's 20. Either way, he's going. Yeah, I think he's 20 going into his fourth season of college football, which is still kind of crazy. And he'll be 21, I guess, by November, I think it is, of this coming season. There's a lot there, I think, to tap into with Sonny for sure, even though he was very good this year. I want to ask you a question, and it's mostly like to check myself a little bit too, because I don't want to be, I guess, like inadvertently dismissive of the impact that Cody Simon had on this program and definitely on this defense last year. Like, they'll be fine without him, right? he's a pretty big presence to take out of there for a lot of reasons. I just don't want to like brush over the fact that those are mighty big shoes to fill in that linebacker room, both on the field and off.
So you came to ask the president of the Cody Simon fan club if Ohio State is going to be okay without Cody Simon. I think you might be in the wrong place. I think Sonny's going to wear the block out, just like Cody did. I think there was a stretch where it was like, you had Jonathan Cooper up there and it's like, well, this could be a defensive lineman every single year for Ohio State. And that didn't necessarily wind up being the case, but this could become a linebacker dynasty of leadership. And even though, as you said, like, Sonny is young, but he showed up as the oldest 17-year-old that anyone has ever met. He has always been a professional. He understands what it means to play at Ohio State. He understands what the linebacker position is going to require. Seems like he's got a pretty great relationship with his position coach. On down the line, his brother's there. Like, they embody what it takes. And he's also now won a national championship. So, to get to the finish line and to lead, summer workouts, mat drills, spring camp, whatever. I think he can handle all of that. Now, will he do it in the exact same way that Cody Simon did? Maybe not. And maybe you don't need that, because every leader is going to have a little different spin on it. I think that if you're looking for the heart and soul of the defense next year, Caleb Downs is going to be the one who he's going to set the tone, I think, overall, and he's going to get most of the attention and spotlight. But there's a reason that you always have this conversation about the linebackers and the quarterback of the defense, and like blood and guts and spilling all that on the field. And I don't have any doubts about Sonny bringing that part of it. And the combination of those two, with Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles leading your defense, this will be a different way of getting there. I'm not saying that it takes two people to replace Cody Simon. I'm not saying that. I just think it helps that you would have two of them with some of those skill sets.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I believe that Sonny and Cody have similar temperaments, similar football IQs and work ethics and talent. Definitely. So I think they'll be fine too. I just like it's the nature of covering college football. They're always like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? It's like, you should like, that guy was really good. Like, I just hope everybody realizes that Cody Simon was awesome. I was reading a mock draft on Monday morning that had Cody Simon as like the 52nd pick in the draft, which is about as good as it gets for an off-ball linebacker in the NFL nowadays. So like that, I mean, that he was always been a little maybe undervalued for his like just pure athleticism and explosiveness. But if he goes that high in the draft, that is a reflection of him not only being an incredible leader and a really smart football player, but a guy whose athletic traits are going to jump off the page at NFL teams. And that's just going to be a lot for Ohio State to replace. But I do think they're equipped to do it.
Yeah. I mean, the productivity that Cody Simon had in the second half of the season and throughout that playoff run there's not more that you could ask for. I mean, that was, I'm surprised. I wouldn't have thought that he would be that high in those mock drafts. I thought that he would probably work his way towards that as he gets through the interview process, goes through the combine. And I don't know, because he was also pretty banged up in the second half of the year. So I know he's out training. Can't remember if he's in Florida or Arizona or which one of those spots that a lot of those Buckeyes have flocked to. But, I think there may be some element where he doesn't have to do some of the drills and stuff in Indianapolis that has become like a hallmark of Ohio State players. They put all that off until their pro day. But, the rest of that stuff, and especially once you turn the film on, I mean, he did everything. And that's not nothing. Like, that is pressure for Arvell Reese that he's going to have to fill those shoes. And if Sonny Styles takes on a more expansive role and is continuing to call plays or whatever, I mean, that's the standard now. And Cody Simon, I think, did his part to elevate it.
I was just going to say that it feels like maybe we're approaching like an elevation in the standard. Like, and I realize I'm saying that about like Ohio State. Like I know that the tradition of the position at Ohio State. I'm not trying to say it's been bad before this, but if you can like take a little bit of a snapshot anyway of the last couple of years, they've had guys drafted for sure. But if you're going to have like Cody Simon as a second round pick, maybe, and then Sonny, who I would think would be right in line to do that, and then you have the freakish talents of Arvell Reese and Riley Pettijohn. It's like Laurinaitis might be heartlining this room a little bit, if I can use heartline as a verb.
I don't know why you wouldn't. It feels entirely appropriate for the situation, and it brings us right back to that coaching carousel, because Ohio State and Ryan Day got that one right. They took their time a year ago. He did, not they. Ryan Day took his time, and he got that one absolutely right. I don't know how anyone could argue it, and that's what he's trying to do right now with multiple different spots to fill. But that, again, is a conversation for another day. Wanted to get back into some of that position talk, because if we don't start now, spring ball will start, and we won't have done it at all. And we can't let that happen either on the podcast daily. So this was a Tuesday. It was a focus on the linebackers, a Tackling Tuesday with Bill Landis. Thanks for joining us. I'm Austin Ward. We'll talk to you tomorrow.